working title, but we cannot name the podcast The Business of Theater. How do we fund it?
Actually, that might be the best subtitle you've had so far, because nothing else at this moment seems
Yeah.
to matter, does it?
We have to go back to all the episodes where this might be the best one and then narrow
Yeah,
it down to those. It's probably like 10 over the 4
right.
seasons that we've had. Yeah, because I that's sort of a loaded statement and we'll get into it. But this is The Business of Theater, a working title. I'm Darnelle Radford,
I'm Mitch Weiss.
and let's get down to business. So the reason I said how do we fund it is because it's not just about like how do we fund the theater? Like, how do we keep it afloat? How do we pay to keep the doors open? How do we pay for admin staff? How do we pay for the production in general? It's about like the infrastructure that supports theater in general. Like, how do we how do we ensure that students can enter into a theater program or at least have theater training? From various resources that are out there because it's not just college that's a pathway, although it's a great pathway. There are people who are just seasoned and have wealth of knowledge who create opportunities for people to learn from them. And how do we raise awareness or make that stuff available? We don't want to lose sight of that. And a lot of things that are designed to uplift the theater community or the arts community in general are funded by grants, and grants are very it's a very tough moment right now with the stock market compromising foundations and the nest egg that a grant provider has, but also the changes in the administration that are limiting access to grants that are available, and all of that is creating this effect of fear and uncertainty, and it's causing everybody to be up in arms.
I do know that there have been major reports over the past, I'd say, 2 years in the United Kingdom, which is well renowned for having some amazing training programs.
Mhm.
I mean, their actors can do an American accent, at
Oh my
birth,
god,
and
yeah,
but we have to learn how to do a British accent,
yeah.
right? Anyway, they said that the available schools for serious professional acting um, are going away, and the number of students who are applying is going down because they don't know, one, they can afford it, since the
Mhm.
prices have to go up because Britain is excuse me, dropping its funding also to these places.
Yeah.
It's very tricky. I don't want to take the focus off of funding, because that's if we can help somebody with some ideas other than the standard normal concepts, that'll be great. We will have done a great service in this podcast. However, I am concerned about that after somebody takes whatever money they have, including if it's a scholarship, and they go to a college for acting or for any other kind of training in the theater, that they are getting a rotten training.
Mm.
And that doesn't, obviously, there are some that are not. I will tell you, I went with a recent graduate of a college who we've hired recently. He's wonderful, but I went with him back to his school's showcase here in New York. All the schools at graduation bring their students in, and they hold showcases for agents and managers and industry people.
Mhm.
They probably tell the kids, "Oh, your career starts now," and they're lying through their teeth right there. But besides that, we do go, we do hire now and then. So I went with this kid to see his school, and it was fine. There was nobody, no standout like he was. And I said, we're seeing a second showcase in about an hour. Why don't you come with us to this other school? And, I have no idea if the school is going to be good or bad. We went there, and his mouth dropped. He said, "I can't believe we thought we did a good job."
Mm,
because this other school, and we're not talking, there's no costumes or special lighting or anything else. It's just the students getting up in front of the audience and singing or acting a scene, or whatever they, or dancing a little bit if that's what it is. And this school blew his school away. It's not that the students were more talented, it's the professors knew how to present the student talent.
mm,
And that means you have to worry about your professors knowing what they're doing.
yeah.
And how does a kid or their parent know that when you enter a school?
Hmm. That's yeah. That is like an interesting thing because you're just sort of blindly accepting that these people will guide you in the right direction. And if you don't know, if you don't have a sibling or a friend that came before you, they can't speak to that per se. But also, just because someone else was successful here doesn't mean that you will be. And it does depend on how you connect with your teacher. And if there's somebody in there who may not connect with that teacher at all.
Or somebody who may connect with only certain kinds of students,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
because
We
there's a lot of
recently
that.
saw the Viola Davis
Yeah.
interview about Juilliard, which is a wonderful school.
Hmm.
Wonderful actors have come out of there, and she felt like it was worthless for her.
Yeah.
I happen to know two people who are quitting Juilliard this year without a degree because they felt unseen.
Wow.
Now, that may not be fair. I don't know that it's true, but you're talking about the arts. How could anybody be unseen? Right?
Yeah.
Especially when they're paying tens of thousands of dollars a year to get a schooling. So, but I will say, for example, another showcase we saw, I happen to know that the musical director of the, whatever he teaches about musical theater, very talented man, very likable. And what they presented to me was a bunch of people who knew how to use their diaphragm and knew how to belt a song,
Mhm.
and not one of them had personality. Not one
Mm.
of them knew how to interpret the song they were singing so that it meant something to them or to me in the audience.
Yeah.
And they didn't particularly look good. So you put all of that together, and I'm going, who am I hiring?
I
Right?
know it. I always think an audition doesn't really show you.
But that's why it's a separate art. And
Yeah.
again, you go to college. It's not, yes, you should learn whether it's the Meisner technique or the Stanislavski technique or whatever the teacher believes is your acting technique.
Mhm.
Just come away with a technique. And casting directors that I hang out with will always say, they gave them no technique. What are we watching? They're reading words from the play. Plus, they're reading words that a 50-year-old would play in the play, and they're 23.
Mhm.
It's irrelevant. For the most part, I'm going to make a big statement. Three-quarters of them are virgins. You can't give them a scene where they're talking about the love of their life and the loss that they have felt after that.
Oh, I forget the song, but Audra McDonald has a story where she talks about how I think she was either 13 or 16, and she sang this like saucy blues
Mhm.
song as an audition piece. It was, I forget, one year we saw Audra's show like 3 times, and
Yeah,
so there were moments that we remembered. I was like, oh yeah, she was telling this story again.
yeah, yeah,
But I remember that, and that she sang the song, and it was like, wow. And this came out of a 16-year-old at the
exactly.
time. I mean, it was innuendo. It wasn't like
Absolutely.
nothing she said was like
But it
offended.
doesn't ring true if you don't understand it. And she, I would assume, only because of her body of work,
Mhm.
I would assume she was very mature or sophisticated
Yeah.
at a very young age. And that's, there's always an exception.
Mm.
And that's the thing. Like this one kid that we did hire, He had an exceptional voice. He was a sight reader, which meant we could teach him a song in a minute. And he was creative and easy to work with. He wasn't that great an actor, but what we were asking him to do was not a major scene,
Mm.
right? So he served his purpose. Uh, I think he saw the other showcase, the other college's showcase, and said, "Oh my God, I wouldn't even know how to sing that song and have that meaning in it." He understood
Wow.
these other kids knew what they were singing,
Hmm.
and they knew how to present it, and they knew today. Oh, I'm sorry. Here come the stories
Yeah.
today. There's and all of these people were cute, by the way. So this is not about, oh, you're handing me some ugly people. So we went to a showcase today, and these showcases are an hour or less. Okay, so this is not hard to sit through. This was hard to sit through.
The
So
longest hour.
the last guy and this woman, they did a scene together, and then he did a monologue. It's their format was she does a monologue, she does a scene with a guy, then he does a monologue. They kept doing little duets like that. I don't even remember what they were talking about. It was so boring. They were having a private conversation at low volume with no energy, no humor, no smiles, no tears, no this, no that. It was monologue. Oh, and I think you did this, and then you did. See, if you had auditioned for me from high school to get into college, I wouldn't have let these two people in. And they're graduating from college. This is an embarrassment to their professors because literally the casting to people I know, as well as even myself, give me 10 minutes with both of them, and that scene would have been exciting. So, how could they have gone through 4 years and not
Mm.
known how to do this?
Huh.
It is just college professors, get your act together.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm angry on behalf of these students.
I mean, they definitely presented before they came all the way to New York. That's like that one
Yeah,
that's one that one showcase that you and I attended. Um they were in that room and I'm like, "You heard yourself in this room before, right?" It was like they were not projecting
nope.
in that room and I was just like, "It's not even a large room. It's high ceilings and everything. You do have to project because you're not mic'd, but you have to project just because you're not mic'd." But it was like everyone had these soft voices like, "I sound great in the shower," like.
Yeah. Well, we went to a big school, meaning that they had a 2 hour showcase just because they had so many people. And they put on a wonderful presentation. It's choreographed to an inch of its life.
Hmm.
So you see people in groupings, you see them in solos. Um, they put on a good show. However, walking out of there, I saw 60 people in 2 hours. I can't tell you the difference between any two of them,
Huh.
including the difference between the men and the women. They
Hmm.
just all blended. They all had good voices, but as you said, they all kind of sang, even when they're belting, they kind of have this nice tone like they're doing television. This is for the theater,
Yeah, yeah. That
right?
that is kinda interesting. Yeah, because, you can tell in some performances that it's like, yeah, if we were in a tight close-up with a boom mic, like, right above you, like, this would sound great. And it's interesting how TV does this too, where everyone talks like this. It sounds like they're in a whisper, but everyone has a raspy voice.
Well,
That's what a lot of these dramas have been.
absolutely, and not only that, you kind of watching TV. My favorite moment is I try to count. This is my problem. I apologize. But I try to count the number of cuts where they show somebody's face who doesn't say or even move their eyes. It's just here they are standing there or sitting there. The
Yeah.
face is blank and they're listening to the other person and nothing happens. That's acting?
Mm,
No, that's learning what to do for television, which is important when you're doing television. When they
mhm,
say we're taking a close up of you listening, well, don't move.
mhm.
But I mean, you've heard Al Pacino say it and Robert De Niro. I don't have to study to do that. I just sit there.
do that.
right?
Yeah.
It's all right. The camera does the work. But
I do like that in an ensemble piece. Like some of the benefits of being on a large stage is that you don't have to focus where the dialogue is being delivered, you know? If there are a bunch of actors on stage, you can look around and see that there's a whole separate thing going on in this corner while you hear that conversation, kind of like they're overhearing the
mhm,
conversation. And yeah, and good actors, like you don't have to be the lead to be a good actor.
that's right.
To see a lot of those moments really sell the show. It's like, oh my god, they're having so much fun. Like uh just think about a musical, like this is what I love about Holiday Inn.
Hmm.
There's so many
The Holiday in the movie or the stage,
the musical.
the, the live musical.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with. I'm the opposite. I don't like anything about it. But go
Really?
ahead. No, it was
Oh.
crap. It was pure crap to me.
No, no.
Maybe we saw different productions.
I the jump rope scene makes me nervous every time, and I love that they did it.
I don't even remember it. So there goes that.
Well, the thing I like is that you know, they all end up at the barn, right? And
Hmm.
there's so many of them that there's all these little nuances of things going on, even though you know, the main action is between the two leads. And they might even be center stage, or they might be somewhere where like they're unpacking things and they're having fun doing that, or like there's a party atmosphere and they're drinking, or they're like there's a scene where they're like at night and everybody's just kind of like running around because they're all young and attractive and you know
But I
it's
agree with
fun.
you. For the most fun as a director is staging 30 people on stage when there are only
Hmm.
two people talking,
Yeah.
right? And you can tell when you see an amateur production, the other people are literally standing there. They don't know what to do.
uh,
And the professionals, you kind of walk in, and the director may not give you a specific. It may just say, "You're listening to this, come up with something." And actors know how to do that.
hmm.
Professional actors. And sometimes the directors say, "Well, that was good, but do something different over there." Or I really want you to unpack that suitcase, you specifically at this moment. But then it's how do they unpack it? How fast
Hmm.
the actors get to throw in their own stuff. On TV, the camera just cuts away,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the fun part of theater. We're back to that. But and here's coming back to the funding. We all know that the reason actors want to work on TV and film is it pays more.
Mm.
You get a policeman running down the street as the backup to somebody who is in the series, the television series, and they'll make more than somebody on Broadway for a whole week.
Yeah.
That's not right. I mean, I understand it, but if that's the truth for Broadway, we are stuck because you can't take blood from a stone. The stone is not getting any blood at all. In fact, it seems the wind seems to be whittling it down to a
Yeah.
pebble, right? And yet, realistically, we need the blood because people need to work and they deserve to work. So how do we do that? That's why I'm always saying the entire we need a new normal. That we have to rethink the whole concept. We're not going to throw it all out, but which parts of it are working, Darnell? Is there anything that's working in the nonprofit
Yeah.
world right now?
I'm thinking because it was just on PBS. I don't want a life that's normal. That's way too far
Yeah.
away.
Oh, you're talking about the musical,
Yeah, next to
yeah,
normal.
next to normal. Yeah,
Next to normal's on PBS right now.
that's right.
You can listen to it. Um, yeah, the a new normal. It's like sometimes there's this anarchistic mindset of like, let's break everything and start over. And
Well, except you and I both know the key bad word in your statement is not. Sometimes you have to break things. I
mhm.
got it, but let's break everything.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
where the problem is.
I know, it's like, can't we just look at this? Like, this has been working to some extent this whole time. There are just bits of it that need to be tweaked and adjusted. Yeah.
And let's let the brilliant minds that have been working in the industry, along with some new ones who may have some fresh ideas, sit around and say, which parts of this do we need to break first? Which parts do we need to replace, or which ones just need an adjustment? And they're all intertwined. We get that.
I think what the theater community needs to ask itself is, if every aspect of our work is so challenging and like requires so much skill to do, like why are we not adequately compensating people to do that work?
Because you can't get blood from a stone. That is exactly why that is the phrase of the day.
Hmm.
Because if certainly if Hamilton or Wicked were to tell me they can't afford to pay their administrative assistant more than $400 a week, I would laugh out loud and call them liars to their face.
Yeah.
But you go to a little nonprofit in Ohio and they're struggling to say, well, you know what, we're doing a developmental show. It's going to be 2 weeks of stuff. People have their jobs and they're just going to rehearse at night, and we think we can give them a dinner and maybe $100. And my answer to that is that may be all they can afford,
Yeah.
but that's not right either. So how do we do that?
Mm. That's true. And I think, every company wants to have their own home, right? So
Hmm.
they work hard to secure a facility, which has nothing to do with the art. Like bringing
Well,
the art
and I'm
to
going to
stage.
argue with you. That may be one of the ways. No, I'm not arguing with you. You brought, but you sparked something, in that I've been thinking a lot about the theater companies that have spaces and
Mhm.
how much money they spend on renovation. Steppenwolf did it in Chicago in the past few years, multi millions of dollars. Signature Theater, brand new space. Second Stage moved from their space because the rent got too high, and yet
Mhm.
they they're successful.
Yeah.
So you start looking at all this, and instead of a theater company needing a home, how about we start with each individual show needs a home?
Mm.
So we look at the model, not the financial model, but we look at the model on Broadway. Every individual show on Broadway is its own corporation, right? They are not connected in any way whatsoever, except that the producers they pay like $250 a month into an association that they can talk to each other. It's like
Mm.
a club, right? But other than that, they're not connected. Um, so if we look at the fact that each show has to then rent a space, if it's a hit, it becomes its home,
Mhm.
right? That maybe in the developmental stages, which nonprofit, blessed nonprofit, is the only place this stuff happens, right? You get a nonprofit theater, and if the company is saying, okay, well, the artistic director says, I like show ABC. I believe in this one. Okay, where are we going to develop this? And find a place for that to be its home.
Mm.
Now, then you can say, okay, the artistic director says, I also like uh, DEF. I also like GHI. Now I got three shows. So, in a sense, you're now starting a theater company, except you're not, because the next year you may still be working on A through I,
Mm.
and you may not have presented it yet. So, you don't have income. Therefore, you can't pay the mortgage or the rent. So you need to figure out for each show, we have X amount of time. This is a total outside the box. I'm inventing this. I have no idea if this can work, but it intrigues me because all the theater companies, nonprofits that I've worked in, are always stuck with their biggest expense is the building.
Mm.
And we're filling it up because if we don't have a show here, We don't have income, and that's the only way we can pay the rent.
Yeah.
And yet they still don't have enough income to pay the rent. So now they have to go ask for donations. So I'm wondering, why not just start with the donations and say, we're developing a show and you're going to own a piece of it when the show is up and running, which could be 3 years from now, 4 years from now, or we may never put it up. Maybe that's the way we work. Maybe that's an experiment we ought to try.
So how does uh so how would that fare if the play has already been produced, right? And
What do you
like
mean? Okay, go ahead.
it's a published play.
Hmm.
We pay royalties for it.
Right, but I'm talking about before it gets to be published.
Oh yes.
The,
Yeah,
the developmental part of it.
all
I'm
of
not
that.
talking about after.
So that sounds great, but like the it's interesting how a theater goes, like it does feel like theaters start with the intention of producing original work. And then they end up
Hmm.
sustaining by saying like we need something that'll be a draw. Like, a dance company will add the Nutcracker because
Right.
it's going to be a draw, and then they can work on the other work. Um, but a theater, depending on your size, you don't necessarily have that luxury. You can't say like the public just announced they're doing 5 world premieres next year. I mean, in their next season, and I can't think of a small theater that would do that because they're all new. It's like how do you hook somebody uh for a completely new season? And which is
Well,
like kind of rhetorical. It's like that would
except
be
the
the thought in terms of planning.
oh, the public is unique.
Yeah.
I mean, it has a very long history, and especially a very long history of making a lot of money off of big hits that go to Broadway.
Hmm.
So a lot of their subscribers, I mean, in the days that I worked there, we had 11,000 subscribers, and that we're talking about back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what they can do now. So you start with that. That means there are enough people to come see your shows, right? And you're not relying on the general public to buy tickets, although that's helpful when you extend it.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what they ought to be doing.
What's interesting that the public does or appears to do is that it's like they're using their stages as developmental stages.
Right.
Because if they do well, then they can give them a limited run on Broadway and then see how long
Or
they
a
make.
limit, or they have control of their space. They can give them a limited run right there.
Well, that's what I mean. Like if they've already committed to bringing it into the public, right? And let's just see where it goes. I like this on paper. Let's see if we can bring it to life here.
But look,
And they do, and it does well. And so they offer a limited run, and it goes to Broadway for a little bit.
but that was the genius of Joe Papp,
Yeah.
who created the public theater. We had again the story. Those who I forget, a lot of people now may not know, but the public theater used to be a library in New York City, and it had closed and it was dilapidated. And Joe Papp came to the city and said, I'll renovate it and turn it into 6 off-Broadway theaters, but you have to rent it to me for $1 a year for 100 years.
Of course.
And the city, thinking it's just going to sit there and we don't have the money to fix it, said yes.
We're not going to let it go.
So for $1 a year, which by the way has been extended beyond the 99 years that the lease was arranged. So it's now gone past it. So you got to put that in perspective. Then they have 6 off-Broadway theaters in which if he has 4 of them running and he decides he wants to do the next show, but he wants to keep one of them running longer, he just moves the show to a different one of his theaters. It was his brilliance. He
Mhm.
set up the right situation. Now, I mean, realistically, whether or not it costs $1.5 million or $2 million to do an off-Broadway musical in New York, that is unsustainable, with
Mhm.
rare exception. The exception, of course, is Titanic, and Little Shop of Horrors. I mean, there are shows that can be sustained off Broadway, but for the most part, they're going to come and go, and you shouldn't spend that much money. And by
Yeah.
the way, Titan didn't cost that to start, so you want to start cheap. Well, you just have to say this is what makes sense financially. How do we do it? And if let's use Theater Exile, you have a gorgeous space, um, a great reputation for putting on great shows. So financially, what amount of money do you have, and what can you do with it? And that way you're not chasing after money. Then if you get money, you have the next year you can do a little more.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not getting into your business at Theater Exile. I'm just talking in principle. This is
Mhm.
the ideal. The same thing happened, by the way. Second Stage in New York bought a Broadway theater. They couldn't afford a Broadway theater. When they figured out that they couldn't raise the money and they had already signed the lease,
Mhm.
they luckily sold some of their backstage space to the Broadway theater next door to allow them to have more backstage space. And they used that money to buy the theater they're in that now has less space.
Wow.
All right. I mean, it's the mother of invention, right? We
Mhm.
are desperate. We do what we have to do, but you need to think of the new normal each
Yeah.
time.
Well, it is interesting as you were saying, you look at the money you have and say, what can you do with this? But like I early, you know, early on in my adult career, I worked at another theater company that had always struggled, in the building that they were in, which it once was a huge mansion of a well-to-do socialite in Philadelphia. They started in the basement of that building.
Hmm.
They started producing theater in the basement of that theater, and then ultimately took over the whole building. And so I was there at a time where it seemed like they could get the money to produce a show. They couldn't get the money to keep the lights on in the building.
Ah,
And so this is sometimes an issue. Like you've got a donor who wants to support a production. They'll put their name on as producer. But and I know we talked about this before, but like no one wants to cover operating.
right.
And
Well,
so it's
same
hard
thing
to
with grants.
yeah.
So many grants will say we'll support your production,
Hmm.
but you cannot use it for administration.
Yeah, it's like, and what are like o operations is not glamorous. We're not gonna sell
Hmm.
tickets for operations. So, like every production we produce has percentage of our administration in it because our administrative team is working on the production
Right.
in various ways, paying everybody in the production, promoting the production, keeping the building intact, all those things. So, but if we were to just do that by ourselves, like if we said we just can't afford to do a full season, we wouldn't have any money.
Right.
It's not a cost benefit for us to take one show off of our lineup because all of the money that the organization would spend is around this production in support of the production.
And without trying to solve your problem, but
Mhm.
then the question becomes, if you've locked yourself into a debt, which
Mhm.
is the building, then how do you use it more often to bring in more
Yeah.
other resources of income?
Mhm.
And that is about your new normal, whatever that is for that building, that
So
theater
the
company.
so the new normal is that we become a tenant in our own building.
It's been done.
And our space isn't completely ours.
I'm trying to remember off the top of
I mean,
my
not
head.
particularly Exile. I'm just saying
Right, right.
a
But
company with
I'm
a space like that.
but I'm thinking of, there was, and this is in the past 6 months. I can't remember the theater company, but there was a place who sold their building to someone who
Mhm.
saw that as, here's an investment. I own a building,
Yeah.
but the deal was we get to rent it for X number of decades, and stay here within that period of time. and as long as we can pay the rent.
Yeah.
So, but it took the onus off of them for the housekeeping part of the building. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. I when I owned a two-family brownstone in Jersey City. Uh, with the exception of financially when you sell it, and the good money you make off of that, I hated every second of it.
Mhm.
If the roof is going to leak, I have to find the money to
Yeah.
put in a new roof. No one's doing it for me. If I live in a rental, I call up maintenance. I say, you got to fix this now, right? And that's it. So the same thing with theater. Are you about the creative? Which, of course, every artistic person in the entire world doesn't want to know anything about the toilets. Just let me worry about the show and about putting the creative people together. The rest of you are there just to make my sandbox mine.
Yeah.
And even the best of artistic directors, in my opinion, think that way, right? Um, I, as a manager, um, to me is like the best of all possible worlds is you have a creative manager who also has some artistic involvement. So you have everything that makes sense. You say, in this case, we just can't afford the $300,000 dress.
Mm.
But because I know that's the one thing in the show that costs so much, I'm going to help you as a manager find out how we're going to do it for $100,000, or else we're going to cut it.
Mm.
And so now you're involved in the artistic decision about a costume. You're talking to the designer of the costume. You're talking to the wardrobe people. You're talking to the director. You're talking to the actor who may be wearing it. You're talking to the artistic director, the producer, whoever is involved. You are now involved in all aspects. And one of the great things about our theater world is we are collaborative. And it's, to me, one of the big problems with not off or nonprofit. And again, don't want to make this across the board, but it does feel like it's pretty much across the board.
Mm.
Artistic directors want everyone else to be their slave,
Mm.
and or at best to be their assistant. I keep seeing ads for jobs that be the associate artistic director.
Mm.
That doesn't mean you have any say in being an
Yeah.
artistic director. You're just keeping
You're
his or
just
her
the assistant,
calendar. You're
assistant
the
to the artistic director.
right. Set up the meeting and keep the calendar.
Yeah.
Right, and that's an assistant. That's not. And then, God forbid, those are the people who get to move up the ranks at the next theater company, get hired as the artistic director, and they actually have no experience doing the hard job of choosing the plays and the artists that are working on it, which is
Mhm.
why so many others fail.
Yeah.
Okay, I've now given you all the negatives about everything that's going on.
Well, the thing is, like, it is a struggle, you know? But the thing is, like, it's not all gloom and doom. The question is, we are fully aware of all of these things,
Mhm.
and it's still worth it.
Yeah, and not only that, we're still here.
Yeah.
That's the one thing, is that every time you hear the theater is dying, the theater is dead, we can't survive, and somehow the next year the theater is still there. I think what scared us is after the pandemic, there a lot of the theaters that said, "But we can't survive unless," they actually didn't survive.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first time in our lives, I'm certainly older than you, that I can remember theater companies going under,
Mm.
and a lot of them. So that's the scary part, which is why I don't have the same hopeful feeling you may have, but I
Yeah.
do notice that the ones that are still around somehow have figured it out.
It's funny because I always say something like, "It's because theater always leaves a ghost light on."
Yeah, it's a nice, pretty poetic
But
thing.
we
And
don't but every theater doesn't have a ghost light. Which is so interesting. It's so iconic to theaters, but, like, every theater doesn't have
yeah. And on that note,
Well, I'm saying like I think it's also because there are people who embody that same passion that many of our earlier leaders had from the start. It's just that it's like the way I felt is before the pandemic, it felt like we had like an abundance of theater. There was a lot of theater of all levels being produced, and it just felt like it was everywhere. And of course, if you're in a city that is, a big theater town, like Philadelphia, just felt like it was thriving on all levels. Like you could go to a black box that has 45 seats and see a show. You could also go somewhere that has 300 seats and see a show. But now it feels like you can only go to the 300 seat houses. Or I mean, we have 100 seats, you can come to us. um but it's just not as it just doesn't feel the way it felt then.
Right.
Because you could like, I mean, I know theater people are in the mindset of like, I got off work at 5, what theater am I going to tonight, you know but now we're thinking like, I don't know, I also like going for walks. I also like camping. I have a child now,
Or
there's just so many other things.
I don't have the money.
I don't have the money, yeah. Yeah, because I this is the thing, like, I wanna hear more from the married couples in theater who have children and still get it done. And, there's quite a few of them in
Mhm.
our orbit that I'm just so thrilled for, and like I follow them and go like, you're an example of it can be done, because a lot of people are putting all of those things on hold in their lives because they think I have to I have to keep treading these boards
Yeah.
until I can get to a point where I can do this. But I think that's also a mindset of, when I get to that point, I'm taking a break. But it's like, we're not thinking about like, how do we do all of those things and keep doing this? Because it's hard now. It's hard when all of the things that we maybe took for granted, like they were just there to kind of help you. Like, I mean, there were people who really understand, I have to work a full-time job in order to work in theater. you
A
know?
lot. A lot. Not only that, a lot of the producers that I met early in my life um, were, they said, I always loved theater, but I knew I couldn't make a living.
Hmm.
So I went into publishing, or I manufacture paper products, or I went into this industry or that, insurance, and I made a good amount of money. And now that I'm 50 something,
Hmm.
I want to retire and use my money to be a
Yeah.
producer on Broadway. However, they don't know what that means, and they come running to the rest of us saying, "So how does
How
this
do you do
work?"
this? Yeah.
But they have the money, and that's why are we stuck like that? Um, and of course, for my thing, and I don't know how to balance this. Um, I wonder those people who are making in the let's say they're theater folk, but they're making a $10 million movie, meaning that they're earning 10 million, so they're famous. Um, or those people who have hits like Hamilton or Wicked or whatever. That what can they do to help the struggling artist, the struggling designer, the struggling actor, musician, make sure they have health care, right? It's not about, it's not an easy answer, obviously, because there are people who shouldn't be acting who could just say, oh, I want to be an actor, right? And say, give me money. That's not what this is about.
Hmm.
But for me, the more places that people can act, can do design work, can direct, can play their musical instrument, or compose or write, the more places that exist that can pay a basic living salary, that will weed out the other people.
Mm.
And that needs to be supported by people with money.
Yeah.
So it's not about, my second cousin donating to a nonprofit, although that helps. I'm not against it, but it is more about who in the industry wants to be involved in setting up a solution, not a stopgap. A stopgap is, gee, Manhattan Theater Club, which is a wonderful institution, where they're having a $1,500 a chair dinner to raise money for whatever losses they had this year.
Mm,
That's hanging out with other rich people, and you're giving. It's like, I'm not against that. It's just not enough. That's not what we need the money for. We
yeah.
need a sustainable income.
So I feel like like the new normal. I don't know. It's tricky. Like I don't know that Broadway needs this per se, but like I was going to say like I feel like the new normal is a focus on the pipeline.
I like that idea.
Because you know, people are going to make changes in their lives. We're not going to have the people that we have forever, and so we have to keep this pipeline fresh and moving. We have to make sure that people who are aspiring don't feel defeated by what's currently happening today, and they don't even get on the pipeline. you know uh and that's where things like like every time I go to New York, we Manhattan Plaza is there. We see how like that probably helps so many people like stay in this business.
Yeah,
Uh,
just so people know, Manhattan Plaza, by the way, there is a documentary about it because it's such a unique two building complex in New York that ended up being set up for performing artists.
mhm,
It's subsidized housing, but not the way that anyone else subsidizes it. If you make a good income, you pay a full rent. If you have a bad year, your rent goes down. Every year, your rent changes based on your situation, and that is the true subsidized housing. Someone who's doing a 10 million, making $10 million from a movie, they don't need a subsidized house,
mhm,
but they're allowed to stay where they are if they want. They just have to pay the full rent, and that allows the landlord to make a profit because it's a balance between the two,
mm,
right? This idea, for some reason, has not been allowed to breed
mm,
further than these two buildings. But the documentary is called Miracle on 43rd Street. Like a takeoff on Miracle on 34th Street,
yeah,
it's Miracle on 43rd Street. And people in this building, Alicia Keys grew up here. Andre de Shields currently lives here. Lots of stage managers on Broadway. And of course, stage manager salaries a lot. They're paying full rent. But
Timothy
then,
Chalamet lived there.
right. And there, but she just passed away this year. There was a 95-year-old actress in a studio apartment here in the building who passed away, and she was paying $250 a month rent. They will not kick you out as long as you pay your rent, but they adjust it based on what money you have in both your assets and your income.
Mm,
And it's an amazing place. God bless that she didn't have to leave while she's being incubated in her bed, and she could stay home, and she passed away peacefully.
yeah.
But this is, and it's not all for artists, by the way, but it is, I think, 80% artists now. It started out almost, the documentary is actually very interesting. It's not boring at all. So take a look, but I wish we could expand this. Um, but that and healthcare, there's some basics, actors equity. You have to work X number of weeks in order to get health care for the following quarter of the year. So while you're working, you may not have health care.
Mm.
And that is a stupid ass system. Gee, do I have an opinion? Um, but it's what they figured their dues and the welfare money that they take in from the shows and the actors, that's what they could afford to provide. Now,
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible idea. Maybe this is where some people come in and say, let's fix this. But it should be people in the industry.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm looking for. I don't, you know.
Yeah. And and so like and so like Manhattan Plaza, there is a group here in Philadelphia that is working towards similar efforts. A group called Scout Limited.
Hmm.
Philadelphians will understand, um, who are the people behind the Bach Building, which is a renovated school that is it's a complete arts mecca. Like there's tons of different artists in there, and so that's like a great space. And now this group had swooped in to save two of the University of the Arts buildings, to keep them on the Avenue of the Arts as art centered facilities. So one of the buildings would become a sort of an artist space, a space for artists to have like offices and kind of you know space. It's like space to work in. And then the other building is going to is proposed to be artist housing. And so that's like a great thing because there's so many, like how many students, how many theater people made their way to Philadelphia to an arts program that allowed them to stay on campus,
Right.
so they could stay in Philadelphia and figure out how they want to grow with the city. And that was really beneficial for them, giving them whatever amount of time living on campus. Like I think I know with UArts, it was only freshmen could live on campus, and then after that, it was like you
Hmm.
sort of had to figure out how to live off campus. So it was like a little bit of a boost, but those opportunities are really needed, not just for the theater community. There's so many, like, there are a lot of initiatives for elders that are very similar, like that kind of housing. There's another group in the city that does that for for the LGBTQ community for elders, and these are the kind of things that I'm talking about, like the pipeline. It's like if you have somewhere to live and it's all taken care of, now you can maybe focus on your art or focus
Right.
on training and development, because it all of this stuff takes time and money. And so if you're constantly worried about money, you can't focus on bringing the art to its true place in the world, you know.
And that's again, as much as I poo-poo the nonprofits sometimes. That's why we need nonprofits, but we
Yeah.
need nonprofits to step up and be the pipeline.
Yeah.
We and sometimes that's very expensive.
Hmm.
So if again, if you believe that your local nonprofit is doing you well and doing the right thing, support them. Right?
Hmm.
We can't argue with that. Um, but we do need. This is where all of our new plays. They, if you consider even the West End is part of the pipeline. There's so many stages of, a writer's going to go. Well, I want to do a reading just to hear it read back to me. It costs money. I have no money. How do I do this?
Yeah.
Well, if the local theater isn't providing space and maybe access to some actors, then you don't have that answer for these writers,
Yeah.
right? So we do. This is part of my new normal is that we need to look at the entire food chain, right? Starting from the very scratch with a writer, with actors, director, everyone with their basic individual talent. Say, how do we develop them to the point that we put them together and we end up with brilliance,
Yeah.
right? That doesn't, ultimately the last brilliance is $30 million on Broadway. It shouldn't have to cost that. And those shows started with the beginning of the pipeline,
Yeah.
right? It just, we need more of them. We need more interesting things than we're seeing,
Yeah.
right?
And I think we need leaders to not forget that it wasn't easy starting out, you know?
It's true.
I have heard a lot of people just hang up on what they used to do. Like back in my day, like, every time I pass a gas station, I say it just to be cute. And like back in my day, gas was 86 cents a gallon. Like how old are you? Gas was 86
30,
cents.
36 cents.
36. See, gas was, tr- you know, lobster was trash once upon a time, especially here in Philly. They used to feed it to prisoners. They call it trash. It was like trash fish. There's just so many things that have changed now. And it's like they're just out of reach. And it kind of seems like society is doing that on purpose.
It does feel that way. It
Yeah, and
does.
it's like I don't know how we survive if you got a bunch of people who can't afford to like enjoy this just like you. It's like don't you want to make money off of everyone, but you're pricing so many people out and you're just no, I don't want to serve everyone. I just want to serve here. But you're a public establishment.
Yeah.
You have we do have to like keep that in mind. Like we are trying to be accessible to everyone. It's just like this is what our governments are supposed to be doing, making sure that their services and programs are available to
And
everyone.
as we mentioned in a previous podcast, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah,
So we now have to look for our new normal.
I know. Yeah. So, I mean, anyone out there listening, like, I think the new normal is a focus on the pipeline. Like, what do you think? What do you think the new normal should be? Uh,
And a personal little promotion, we grow theater er.com.
yep.
It's where we're developing now at the moment 9
Hmm.
new shows.
We are a pipeline.
We
Yes.
are a pipeline. So and we, by the way, are not a nonprofit.
Hmm.
So check out what we're trying to put the things we're talking about uh, into the real world. This isn't just Darnell and me talking. We are
Yeah.
trying to live
We are
uh,
trying to walk the walk.
the walk. And so far the experiment, in my opinion, is working.
Mhm.
It's slow because it's we're the only ones trying it at the moment.
Yeah.
But we hope maybe somebody will decide to quicken it up.
Yeah. We're focusing on development, which is a huge part of the pipeline.
Right.
Um, but perhaps we have to explore uh, a sort of producing model that's very similar to our development model.
Yeah.
And because those are the things, because otherwise we are developing this work and it's great and it's ready for a stage, and then we have to go back into the system to try to get it produced. And that's where the struggle was to begin with. There
Right.
are a lot of companies who have a development program, a play development program.
I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think they do. I think they give lip
Or
service.
give off the appearance.
No, they have lip service. Their idea of a development program is we allow a reading.
Hmm.
We put some actors together with a script that we have not analyzed, critiqued, and rewritten, and we let them read it back. It's usually terrible or mediocre because it's a first draft.
Hmm.
It may have a good idea, which is probably why they chose it in the first place. They do it once and then they never do it again. That is not development. There are a couple of companies that are doing more than that, so bless them. But
Yeah.
it's not the majority. We need the majority to start doing this, to say we're going to commit to some of these and understand that the first time out is going to be a failure. And
Yeah.
then we're going to work with these talented writers to take it from failure to success. That's development.
And it always sometimes feels like they've started out that way, and then the season just took over everything, and then the development becomes an afterthought.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with
it's
you.
like I don't understand if your development program is not trying to bring those new plays to your main stage. Like, what are you doing? Because
That's right.
if you just do a general invite and a handful of people show up to the reading, that's going to be great for the writer who's continuing to work the show. But it's not going to be great if like there isn't a producer in the room who's like, I like this, I want to keep doing that, and like And yeah, and so that's often what's missing from uh
Well, and
these
why would
producers.
anybody who wants to be a quote unquote legitimate commercial producer, they're not going to invest at that early stage.
Hmm.
That's the pipeline. We need the nonprofits to step up and say, we're going to take it and get it to the point that a legitimate producer can say, oh, I can raise a lot of money because I think I can make it back and make a profit on this.
Mm,
That's what producers think. And until they see something that looks like a product that they can bring to other investors and say, we're going to make money off of this,
yeah,
right? Then you don't have anything. So that's why else shouldn't we make nonprofits pay taxes? If they're not going to do the hard work at the beginning, they should pay taxes or go away.
yeah. You know, my rejected title was "Show Me the Money."
Yeah. Well,
Show me the
no,
money.
you've used that
I
before.
know. That's why it's a rejected title. It was like,
Uh,
"Hey, that idea came fresh, but it's already been done."
This- and you see, like these readings, we threw it out after the first reading.
Yes. But, yeah, the pipeline is our focus now. How do we fund it? And this and other stories on future episodes because we are out of time. And so that's the business of theater, a working title. I'm Darnell Radford,
Mitch Weiss,
and we will see you at the theater.
yay.